Hi, I'm
Hi,
Stacy.
and I'm Heather, and welcome to Why Do People Do That?
So today's episode is a difficult conversation about Luigi Mangione.
So, is it why do people kill CEOs, or why do people support killers, or
I think it's both questions,
Mhm.
really, right? It's what led Luigi Mangione to this point in his life, this dark place where he felt he needed to assassinate a CEO of United Healthcare, a major medical insurance.
And what's crazy is he's not even a United Healthcare member.
No, he's not. He does not have United Healthcare. And I think the other why do people do that question is I'm fascinated by the response of society. And I think that's a really important conversation for us to have. Why are
Mhm.
people responding to it the way that they are? So where do you want to start?
Well, I think we were talking about this before, that you and I were both kind of Googling and trying to get information.
Yeah,
And one of the funniest things, one of the things I found was Burger King tweeting, "We wouldn't have snitched,"
right.
which I find so interesting. And I was seeing kind of debates online of, would you have turned him in?
Yeah.
Like if you were sitting at McDonald's, so would you have turned him in?
Me?
Hmm.
Yes, I would.
No second thoughts?
No. And the reason I would turn him in is because I don't know what his next plan would have been. I don't know that he's not a danger to society and innocent people. We don't really know much about this CEO who was murdered, so I can't even say whether he was a good or bad person because they're not really talking much about that. But regardless, I don't think that it's safe for us in society to take matters into our own hands in this way, even if we don't agree with the way that society is functioning, even if we don't agree with capitalism and we don't agree with the way the medical health insurance business works. There are ways to go about bringing about change.
Hmm.
And
And
I don't
killing a
think,
CEO on a busy street in Manhattan is not the way.
yeah, assassinations are not the way. And so, let's start with that. We can
Well,
get
wait, I want to
to,
get back to answering my question of would we have turned him in? Because I got to say, I'm kind of on the fence about it.
yeah.
I mean, morally, absolutely agree. Murder is
Hmm.
wrong. I mean, he can't take, vigilante justice and take that.
Hmm.
But he has become this like cult hero.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's really been interesting, like, the threats that, McDonald's is getting, McDonald's Stafford's getting, for turning him in. And I think, you're putting a target on your back because he has such a bizarro fan base. I mean, Free Luigi is all over Twitter and
Yeah.
Instagram, and it's everywhere.
Did you
And
see the interview at the jail? A lot of the reporters went to the jail, and the inmates at the prison where Luigi is staying were actually screaming out the window, "Free Luigi! Free!" And then they started interviewing the inmates, and they were talking about how horrible the food was and how horrible the conditions were. But
they had a funny contest in Manhattan of people wearing hoodies
mhm.
and, masks and like, impersonating like who was the best Luigi impersonating. I mean, it's taken on a complete life of its own.
So, what do you think is going on? You called them the bizarro people, the bizarro response, whatever it was that you said. What do you think is going on for people that people don't think he should be in jail and people don't think he should be turned in? What is that about? And what is it about for you? Why do you not want to turn him in?
Well, I mean, I don't want to turn him in because I don't want the target on my back because he has such a fan base and such a
Oh, you
following.
don't want the fan base to think you suck.
Yeah.
Got it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
But this
I
the
would,
fan.
well, let me back that up because I would turn him in anonymously.
So you do think he should have been turned in?
100%,
We're all on the same
absolutely.
page
Oh,
there.
yes, I don't think
Okay.
he should be allowed to roam around
You just
free.
don't want everyone hating you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's about protecting yourself from
Yes.
the fan base. But let's talk about the fan base. Let's talk about this reaction. Let's talk about the response that he's this hero. What makes him a hero?
Well, I mean, I think people are fed up with the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
So I think everyone is kind of on board and sort of being enraged by the way they're treated by insurance companies and, corporations and greed, if you want to really kind of make it more global. But I think that, there's a lot of support from families that have, had claims turned down and things like that, that they're enraged too. So people are kind of connecting with that, and you know what? I'd fucking kill him too. Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Personal example, which just happened to me the other day. My daughter has type 1 diabetes, and I can't tell you how many times I go to refill her insulin or her Dexcom sensors that, monitors glucose, and there's a problem. So just the other day, for example, she texts me from school and says, "Mom, you're going to kill me. I just realized I only have enough left for tomorrow. I'm going to need a refill. Sorry, I know I'm not supposed to tell you at the last minute." And I'm like, "No problem. I'll figure it out." So I call CVS and say, "Are there any refills for her insulin? Can I call one in?" And they said there are, but it's too soon to refill the insulin. GHI is not going to cover it until December 28th. That's 2 weeks from now. And I'm like, so my daughter, who needs insulin to live, literally to live, can't have insulin for 2 weeks? I said, "All right, so can you just fill it anyway and I'll pay for it?"
because
And
you're in a position to be able to do that, and not
yes,
everybody is,
that's my
unfortunately.
point.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So the woman on the other end of the phone says, "Oh, well, that's going to be $601.96. And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Is that okay?" And I said, "Well, it has to be, right? Because
Not really okay, but
my
this is my daughter's life.
$600. I'll pay the $600. But to your point, not everyone can do that, right? I'm blessed and privileged in the fact that I have the $600. I shouldn't have to because she has health insurance, but I have the $600 to buy the insulin. However, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So what happens? What happens? That kid then goes without insulin for 2 weeks until the insurance company is willing to cover it because it's time. Now you can have your insulin. And in the meantime, that person with type 1 diabetes goes into diabetic ketoacidosis and ends up in the hospital.
Yep, which is far more expensive a stay than the $600 for the insulin would have been.
Right. It's a lose-lose situation, but yet this is what is happening. And so we know that insurance companies are denying things left and right to save money.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the CEO of a major insurance company like United Healthcare making a salary of $10 million a year. That's what he was making.
Wow.
And people are angry. So I think there's merit to the anger.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think everyone can identify with that, either having the claim denied or just the rage at someone pulling a $10 million salary.
Yeah. Just to talk about that for a minute, it's okay that someone's making a $10 million salary, right? I think there's definitely that triggers people and people are envious, right? People who are working their ass off to make $50,000 a year and can barely make ends meet is pissed off that that guy's making $10 million a year because it feels very imbalanced and unjust and excessive. And I get that. But I would be okay with the guy making $10 million a year if the company wasn't trying to save costs
At the expense of people's health.
at the expense of people's lives, right? Putting my daughter's life at risk by telling her she can't have her insulin for 2 weeks so that you could pay and I'm not saying that this is happening at GHI because I don't even know if GHI has a CEO because they're a government funded plan. But nonetheless, that's where the anger and the rage is coming in for people. I think there's a lot of the people at the top are making so much. United Healthcare profited, I think, something like $16 billion last year. And so if a company is profiting $16 billion, why are they working so hard to deny claims? And why are they charging such high premiums for the insurance in the first place? You've got people paying $1,000 or more per month to have the insurance. Some people are paying $2,000 a month. Depends on what kind of plan you have or whether or not you need a family or an individual plan. But they're spending money they can't afford to have the insurance in the first place just for the insurance to turn around and give you a hard time about whether or not they think it's medically necessary for you to go to therapy or for you to have your
Get
surgery
a medication
or get insulin. I think that the rage is justified.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to sit here and argue the rage.
No, I don't think anyone's arguing that. I think it's just his decision to take this man's life,
Yeah.
to kill a guy. I mean, he killed a guy.
Yeah.
I get he's angry, but you can't kill people.
Right. So let's switch over for a minute and talk about Luigi. Right? And then let's come back to the people and the people's response, because I think it's really important to note, and I really want to, I'm saying this now because I want to make sure we come back to it. I think it's important to note the polarization in society where people feel like they have to either take this side or that side. There's no middle ground anymore. There's no, like, can we hold both things in our hands? Can we say that we could be angry at the health insurance company? We can be angry at the health system in the United States today that clearly isn't working for most of the people, and also say it's wrong to murder a person who may or may not have even had anything to do with that. We don't know. This guy Brian Thompson, who was a father and a husband, in addition to being a CEO, we don't know that he was personally responsible for decisions that were made about denied claims.
Oh, he wasn't. He's well removed from that.
Right. And we don't know that it was even his decision what his salary would be. And if he refused his salary and said, no, don't pay me that much, would that have made a difference? Right? Regardless, even if he's a bad guy, hypothetically, even if he was responsible and he is wrong for the way he does things, is assassinating him the answer?
You still can't kill a guy.
And is that okay? And I think the answer is no. So can we say this system is wrong, but it's also wrong to kill somebody, right? Can both be wrong at the same time? Does it have to be one or the other? If I'm against the healthcare system and the way things are going, then it has to be that they're all bad and it's okay to murder them. It's okay to kill them. It's okay to just kill somebody because we don't agree with their philosophy and how they do things, right? So where's the middle ground, right? And the middle ground is somewhere around, this is wrong, but there's a better way to handle it. You don't just murder somebody. And I understand people's joy. They feel vindicated, right? They feel like, oh, we finally
got what he was coming. Yep.
Right. He got what, and I think that's something that Luigi even said in one of his social media posts, right? They had it coming to them. I understand where that mentality is coming from. I understand why people feel that way. They're angry. But can you be angry and say that murder is wrong at the same time?
Absolutely.
Can we do that? But they can't seem to do that. They can't seem to say that Luigi did was wrong and what the medical field is doing is wrong. What health insurance company is doing is wrong. What capitalism is doing is wrong. But also what Luigi did was wrong. Can they both be wrong?
I think everyone, I mean, it is a weird, very big disconnect.
Yeah. And I think the polarization of society, which is something we talked about a little bit in our election episode, right? This feeling of when you become so, I think, convinced that your take or your argument or your side is right, that you can't see any merit to the other side. And it's important to see merit to both sides. But let's pause on that and talk about Luigi for a minute. So why are people, so supportive of Luigi? Why do people like Luigi so much?
Because he's hot.
He is hot.
And it's a shame. But I think, if you look through his social media posts, like, he's an attractive guy. And, he's got that fan base of young women, like, oh, I'll support him.
He seems likable because not only is he hot, but he has a very altruistic, pro the little people, pro society kind of mentality, right? Like, I want to do something to fix the healthcare system that is plaguing so many of you. And I'm going to make a difference for you, and a difference needs to be made, and something needs to change, and it's not fair what's happening. And so, his argument, his fight, his battle is one that that really resonates for people, right?
That people can identify with and get behind.
Right? I think people align with it. and in addition to the fact that he's cute and likable,
Hmm.
what if he wasn't cute? What if he was ugly?
I think it would have played out very differently.
What do you think would have happened?
He wouldn't have the hashtag Free Luigi wouldn't be trending. He wouldn't have the support. He wouldn't be all over social media.
Do you think, though, that the hatred for the healthcare system in our country is strong enough that whoever this was might have had a fan base even if they weren't hot?
Yes, I do think there's going to be that band of people that kind of supports. Well, he got what what was coming to him, and they deserved it. But I don't think it would have gotten all of the media attention, all of the support, because he's attractive.
I think it adds to it.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination. You've got like the perfect storm
Hmm.
here of he's a good looking person, which people are drawn to. And it's a sad story, right? We know that he had, a recent surgery and he had pain and he's fighting for the little guy.
Yeah.
He's fighting for the people. He has a good cause, right? And so I think that has really drawn in a lot of people to want to support him because they look at it like he was fighting for us. He
Yeah.
sacrificed himself. He's a martyr, right? The healthcare system is broken, right?
And he's standing up and doing something about it.
Right, right. And I think that the bullet casings had the words deny, defend,
Depose.
depose, or
Hmm.
deny, depose, defend, which means fight your hardest to deny the claims, defend your argument to deny the claim, and then fight it in court, or fight it wherever you have to fight it to substantiate your denial of the claim. And it's the denials, all the claim denials. And when I talk about claim denials, what I'm talking about is when people submit a claim to an insurance company to have it covered, and then the insurance company turns around and says, no, we don't find this medically necessary, we're not going to cover it. And now the person either can't get the surgery or the procedure or the medication, or they have to pay for it, money they don't have,
Hmm.
right? And so that's the system that Luigi is fighting against, and that's the system that is failing Americans, that people can really resonate with, and why this is something that is I think so close to people's hearts, because a lot of people have a story. Just like
Yeah.
I have that story that happened to me literally this week, trying to
Hmm.
get my daughter's insulin, which isn't that big of a deal for me because I have the $600. But for the mother who doesn't have the $600, who's going to pray every night that their child doesn't end up in the hospital because they don't have the insulin,
That's keeping them alive.
that is an insane, insane predicament to be in, especially when you're paying insurance premiums. And maybe if you weren't paying the insurance premiums, you'd have the $600 for the insulin,
Mm.
right? But you need the insurance for the catastrophe that could happen, because then you're going to owe $50,000 to the hospital or not be able to get the care you need. So it is legitimately a very broken system.
Yes. But it doesn't give someone the right to take out the CEO. We can't live in a
So
society where people just decide to execute CEOs because they don't agree with what they were doing.
yeah, I agree. So let's talk about Luigi, poor Luigi. Let's talk about what was happening for Luigi. In your research, did you find anything that you found that struck out for you?
Ivy League educated.
Mm-hmm.
He came from a prominent family,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting because, again, not a person who is a member of United Healthcare and not someone who's really even kind of struggling financially, which I sort of find interesting that this is the fight he chose to take up when it's really not even directly impacting him necessarily.
Right. So I think that a lot of people are confused by the fact that he was so smart and came from a prominent family with a lot of money, because they will then look at it and say, well, money didn't play a factor for him. And he didn't have United Healthcare, so he didn't have anything personal with them. So what is this fight about for him? So let's unpack that. What we do know is that just a few months before the shooting, he had a surgery
For his back.
for his back.
We all saw the
So
picture of his weird spine.
yeah, with those clamps on his spine. So there's a real, and I forgot the name of his condition because it's a really hard word to pronounce, and so it keeps escaping me. But he has an actual spine condition that made it difficult for him to sit. It makes it very difficult and almost impossible for him to be intimate. Sorry, ladies, but
Even
Luigi
though he's hot.
Mangione is not going to be having any conjugal visits in prison because he can't have sex. So there's that. So that definitely isolates him in a way because he can't really, I mean, what kind of a relationship does he feel at 26 years old he's going to be able to have with a woman if he can't be intimate with her? So that plays a role. Plus all the pain he was in, not being
Mhm.
able to sit, right? And then he has this surgery sometime in the spring. And then by July, he goes completely dark, meaning his family reported him missing.
Yes.
His mother couldn't find
Hadn't
him,
heard from him in months.
right? And was worried and scared. So he stopped posting on social media, and he stopped talking to his friends and his peers, and he stopped talking to his family around July, right? That's several months ago.
It's a
So
long time of isolating with your own thoughts and kind of spinning down into a dark hole alone.
yeah, he was clearly spinning into a dark hole. What else do we know about Luigi? So one of the things I heard a week or two ago, I heard somebody on the news say Luigi had Lyme disease. And that was it. It was mentioned one time in this tiny little blip, and I caught it, right? My spidey senses went up. And I was like, oh, he had Lyme disease? Why is no one really talking about that much? And I've been watching the news and I've been reading and I've been researching so to prepare for today. And there's no mention of his Lyme disease. So I went on the deep dive and I looked it up and I found it. So Luigi was diagnosed with Lyme disease when he was 13 years old. So that was 13 years ago. And he did have psychiatric issues that came from Lyme disease, which commonly does come from Lyme disease. And one of the things that people with Lyme disease talk about is brain fog. So Luigi had posted on social media on a bunch of different sites. And they were quoting in this article that I found, they were quoting a lot of the things he said on his social media sites. And they were talking about, he was talking about his brain fog up all through school and through college, right? And he went to an Ivy League school. He went to University of Pennsylvania, right, for I think math and engineering.
So a very smart guy.
Very smart guy at a very, very competitive school with a lot of demands on him. And from what I can see in the social media posts, he was struggling because of the brain fog to meet the expectations of school. And one could surmise, maybe, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to take an educated guess that maybe the expectations of his family, right? They were a very well-to-do family, very successful, owned country clubs, owned a nursing home. And there was an expectation that
He'd be successful. Yes.
He's smart and successful, and he's going to be successful, right? Everything that we're seeing in the media, he had everything going for him. He had everything going for him. He had everything going for him, but he didn't. But there was this expectation, hey, Luigi, you have everything going for you. Go to this Ivy League school, do well, excel, get good grades, become something because all this opportunity is in front of you and you're smart. But something wasn't going right for him, right? So there's...
Blank stare. Apparently not. Something was not going right for him.
I was giving you a moment to respond.
Yeah, well, that wasn't my moment.
That's okay. I wanted to make sure you had room. So what's going on for Luigi, right? He's got brain fog. He's struggling to keep up. He's struggling to make himself a success. And so what do we know about somebody who's got brain fog and they're really trying to do well and there's an expectation that they should do well and they're in a very competitive place. It's very hard for them, but they have to keep pushing themselves. Psychologically,
I mean, he's going to have a hard time, but is brain fog just a cop-out? Like, I mean, most people's families are pushing them to be successful and to do the right thing and to, make them proud and to kind of have everyone has expectations on them.
Right. So, what is it like to have brain fog? What does that even mean? And could there have been more to it? Right. And again, I don't know. I'm speculating, and I'll admit that I'm speculating. But I have, as a therapist, I have experienced, I can think of one patient in particular who had Lyme disease and developed a condition called PANS. PANS is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric syndrome.
That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
That's why they call it PANS.
Yeah, that's why we shorten it to PANS, exactly, make it easier to remember. And I can remember the name of it because I've got the letters. There you go. So, what is PANS? PANS is an actual autoimmune disease where the brain attacks itself and it creates psychiatric symptoms. So, quick example, this little girl was 7 years old. She was bitten by a tick, got Lyme disease, and got PANS. And she had a complete personality change overnight where she started destroying things, breaking things, hitting, punching. Um, Something as simple as she was holding her iPad in her hand and she was coming back into session with me, and her mom just simply said to her, "Do you want me to hold your iPad for you so you don't bring it into your session with Stacy?" And the kid like just went dark and just threw the iPad on the floor, started stamping on it and screaming and yelling, pushed me into the wall, ran out into the parking lot and started running around the parking lot, screaming at the top of her lungs that she wanted a car to hit her. We had to call an ambulance.
It's kind of terrifying.
It was terrifying. And it was not something that she would normally do. It's out of character. And so she did go to the hospital and she was tested for PANS. They tested her blood to see her mycoplasma levels in her blood, and they found her mycoplasma levels were very high. She was diagnosed with PANS. So the psychiatric symptoms, right, these very scary, self-destructive, almost suicidal, homicidal kind of behavior that came out of her was coming from the PANS, which was caused by the Lyme disease. So I don't know that Luigi has PANS, but
The
could there,
history of Lyme disease, there you could make that assumption, or
yeah,
it can be within the realm of possibility.
yeah, but even more interesting is the fact that he goes dark after the back surgery. And then several months later is when the murder takes place, which he was planning and plotting, right? We know he was planning and plotting. It wasn't a sudden, act of
Yep,
impulsive,
rage.
rage or, this momentary lack of sanity, right? It was planned and plotted. But during this time, he completely shuts everybody out of his life and he goes to this dark place. But this was immediately following his surgery. So, one of the things that we know about surgery is that if you have an autoimmune disease, the stress of the surgery on your body
Can trigger that.
can absolutely trigger an autoimmune disease. So, if theoretically he had PANS, maybe that was lying dormant in his body and was part of the brain fog he had been experiencing since he was 13 years old, it is very possible that those symptoms relapsed and reemerged post surgery, which would potentially explain why all of a sudden
He starts writing this manifesto and decides that he needs to.
makes this plan, shuts out everybody in his life, right? Because it was after the surgery that things seemed to really shift for him. So something about that. So it could have been the Lyme disease and the PANS response and the autoimmune response to the surgery. But also, what was it like for him to have that surgery and still be in pain? What was it like to not be able to rely on the healthcare system to fix him? It couldn't help the Lyme disease, right? He still had brain fog all these years later, right? The medical field seemed to, let him down over and over again. And then this back condition, and he got the surgery for it, which is great,
And it still didn't help.
but it still didn't help. What I found striking to me was one of the things he wrote on his social media accounts. He was giving people, it was like a message board for people who had this back condition, and he was offering people guidance and advice on how to go about getting the surgery, because the surgery he claimed was somewhat helpful with the pain, but there was still pain there. He was trying to encourage people to go ahead and get the surgery and to convince their doctors that they need the surgery because, as we know, the doctor has to prove medical necessity to your health insurance company in order for your insurance company to pay for the surgery. So, how do we prove medical necessity? Luigi says in his post, convince your doctor that you're not able to work because that's all this society cares about. If you tell them you're in pain, they won't care. But if you tell them it's intruding in your ability to work and make a living, then they'll do something about it.
Wow.
Right? So let's just kind of absorb that for a minute.
I mean, that's his opinion.
Right. But he's the murderer.
Mm.
So if that's the opinion of the murderer, what was happening for him psychologically that could have led to this murder? If that's what he thinks, what does he think about society?
That it is greedy and a capitalist society that's focused on work and money.
Yeah. He didn't like that because it seems like his experience, based on what we've read, his experience is that no one cared about him and his struggle and his pain because he might have been saying, I'm having a hard time. And the message he got from whomever was, it doesn't matter that you're struggling. It doesn't matter that you're in pain. You have to keep going. You have to keep trying. You have to keep fighting because you need to make a living and you need to go to school and you need to be something and prove something and earn. And this is what's important. Not the fact that you're in pain, not the fact that you have brain fog, not the fact that you're never going to be able to have a relationship with a woman, all these things that are causing you to suffer. None of these things matter.
The only thing that matters is the ability to work.
Yeah, that's what it seems like he was saying. Something else that I learned about him in my research, you might have read this also, you tell me what you think, is that he really liked Ted Kaczynski.
The Unabomber.
The Unabomber. Do you remember Ted Kaczynski?
Just, I mean, I read something also about the Unabomber, him reading the Unabomber. There we go. Unabomber.
Okay. So Ted Kaczynski is the Unabomber. Right? So we know he liked Ted Kaczynski. And what we know, and I'm not an expert on Ted Kaczynski, but what I do know is that he was bombing people and murdering people because he believed that technology was going to ruin society.
That's a whole other thing. There was another book on Goodreads that he reviewed and liked that was kind of odd. It was the Unabomber book and another one.
I think they were all sort of focusing around the same. There was a bunch of books that they talked about that he liked. But they all sort of were coming from the same thread that technology is ruining society. And it made me think about something you said in a podcast of ours recently.
Ooh.
You said, isn't it interesting that this concept keeps coming up over and over again about social media and how it's ruining the world? Right? How, we keep talking over and over again about how we emotionally have become slaves to how social media shapes society and how we see ourselves. Right? And this need to belong. And this need to fit in, right? We were in our holiday stress episode, we were talking about
the picture with the tree.
The
and wanting to get the picture with the tree.
Right, the picture of the turkey on Thanksgiving, right?
It's your nemesis.
Right, and you were saying, I take the picture of the turkey.
No, I don't take the picture of the turkey. I do take the tree.
You take the tree and you post it because everyone else is.
Yeah.
And there's that lure to want to fit in and be a part of everything else and everyone else, right? And so Luigi believed very strongly, just like Ted Kaczynski. And Ted Kaczynski also was a very
smart. Yes.
And was a mathematician. So they had that in common, which is super interesting. What do you think that's about?
I don't know, but on the very smart, how does a very smart Ivy League college educated guy walk around with this 3D printed gun with his fingerprints on it?
What are you saying?
That I mean, I've watched enough crime shows to know that you need to get rid of the murder weapon. Like, why is he days later still carrying it around with him?
Do you think that he wanted to get caught? Do you think that he wasn't as smart as we all think? Or do you think that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't in a clear state of reality? Could he have been delusional or grandiose and thinking that he wouldn't get caught?
I could see all of that. It's just one of those, you start reading conspiracy theories with this too, and it's like, they
It's a what
found
the
his
fuck kind of
fingerprints
moment.
on, the water bottle and the granola bar wrapper near the area, and
Why would he
they
do
happened to
that?
find him with the gun. Like,
Why do people do that? Yeah. Yeah, because he very easily could have tossed that gun somewhere,
mm-hmm.
right? So what was that about? Only he has the answer.
Yeah.
Maybe he might not even know. So he could have been, I think he was smart. So it wasn't that he wasn't smart. This had nothing to do with intelligence, right? But the reality is, you could be the smartest person in the world, but still have a mental health issue. Clearly, there was a mental health issue. Ted Kaczynski also.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is that they were both extremely intelligent individuals who were mathematicians, right? He was in mathematics and engineering, and Ted Kaczynski was in mathematics. So what could that connection be? Any thoughts?
I'm just thinking Good Will Hunting and him writing on the wall.
Okay. So what do we know about him? Anything that has anything to do with Ted Kaczynski or
Probably
Luigi?
not. It just came up.
You're just thinking about Good Will Hunting. Okay. So what I'm thinking is that you've got these two individuals that really see the world through a very mathematical, engineering type perspective. Right? They look at the world in numbers.
And logic.
Yeah, and logic.
And things that kind of make sense, like less of kind of a creative, arty, flowy thing.
Yeah. So I wonder, when you have somebody that really understands things on a mathematical level, right? And then they look at society and how society functions, right? Are they looking at it in a way, and are they able to map it out like an equation? Let's go back to Good Will Hunting. I'm glad you brought him up, because that's a really good point, right? So for anyone who hasn't seen Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon plays the part of a brilliant student
He was a janitor.
who was a janitor because he couldn't get into the school, right? Or he couldn't afford
Couldn't
the
afford
school,
it, yep.
couldn't afford, bad upbringing, the whole 9 yards. So there's a math equation on a blackboard that all of the top math students
At MIT.
could not figure out.
And the janitor goes and figures it out.
And the janitor, in the middle of the night, solves the equation. And the math professor is floored. And they decide that they're going to sponsor him, I guess, being in school, right?
No, it was part of his release from, it was a legal thing.
A legal thing, right?
Like his parole officer agreed to let him go because he was working there as part of parole release. We're going to get way sidetracked with this.
Point being, he now becomes a student, and they make him go to therapy, and he's doing this equation on the board, right? So the equation, he was able to see, when he looked at that blackboard, he was able to see something that made perfect sense to him that did not make sense to anybody else, even the smartest people. So, right, so Ted Kaczynski and potentially Luigi Mangione now, they're looking at society like it's an equation. They're looking at it very mathematically from an engineering perspective, right? Very logical. And they're saying, shit
This
don't make
doesn't
sense.
make sense.
This doesn't make sense. Something has to change. This doesn't make sense. And both Ted Kaczynski and Luigi Mangione believed that the only way to make an impact, to create this ripple in society that's going to actually elicit change, is violence. That was what they believed. I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying what I think they think.
But I mean, to prove the point, though, I mean, people have spoken more about health insurance and denials and claims, and they're supporting that feeling of rage in the last 2 weeks than you've ever heard about it before. Everyone's coming up and talking about it and kind of understanding his rage with that, and he's even getting support from people saying that he should have killed him.
Yeah. Yeah,
So it is
absolutely.
creating change. It is, people are having the conversations. I mean, I don't know that the rate of denials is going to necessarily change, but there was something that happened the other day with an insurance company denying across the board anesthesia times,
Yeah.
and they had turned that back.
Good, because there was a lawsuit going on. It was a Blue Cross Blue Shield
Hmm.
was deciding that they were going to limit.
The time for anesthesia for surgeries.
How crazy is that? You know what that means? That means either you have to turn down an opportunity to have potentially a life-saving surgery because you might end up needing anesthesia longer than Blue Cross Blue Shield is willing to pay for it, or you're going to take the risk of having the surgery and then getting slapped with an enormous bill after your surgery that you can't pay because the anesthesia was only covered for 4 hours, but your surgery took 8 hours, because you can't always know how long a surgery is going to take.
Yeah, you go in.
Complications
Yep,
come up.
absolutely.
Right? It's like when a contractor comes in to tear down a wall and all of a sudden they find brick underneath and they're like, oh, this is going to be a lot more complicated than we thought. Like, how do you go into a surgery knowing you can come out with a $10,000 anesthesia bill? Right? So luckily, a lawsuit happened and Blue Cross Blue Shield pulled it away. But yeah, that is what's happening in society.
And probably would have continued the route that it was going had this not been front page news right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, on some level, he is creating a change. People are talking about it. People are looking more closely at it.
Right. So I think the sad thing is that Ted and Luigi were both smart enough to know that there is some merit to what they're saying. Violence can bring about change. So what are we doing wrong as a society? What do we have to do differently in society where we're not pushed up against the wall here
Forced.
to think that we have to literally go to war in order to bring about the change that we need? And so, that's where Luigi becomes a martyr, right? And I feel badly for Brian Thompson and his children and his wife, because maybe he was a good guy who didn't deserve to die.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe change could come about without having to kill somebody. But what is that? How do we do that? What do we need to do to bring about that change? And it looks like both Luigi and Ted Kaczynski saw it as impossible. That there is a way to change, there is a ripple, but we have to make the ripple, right? How do we make the ripple without an assassination? What do we do, right? It requires
something big.
It requires organized protest, and I don't mean march through the street with a poster kind of protest, right? Like, what can the medical field do to bring about the awareness and the change that it needs to bring about in order for the healthcare system to change? Who needs to know what's going on? Who has the ability to make the change? Who are the change agents in this scenario, right? So if I bring it down to a smaller level, right, for us as social workers in our spaces, how many people do you come across in your everyday work in the drug rehab? How many people need help that get denied the help because the insurance company won't pay for it, but they really need it?
It's really interesting that you bring that up, because the first several years I was there, you had to fail at outpatient before your insurance company was willing to pay for inpatient. And I mean, in the 15 years that I've been there, New York State specifically has changed that families, I mean, went to Albany. There was a lot of advocating. There was a lot of grassroots efforts to have changes made with regards to paying for substance abuse treatment. But I mean, it came out of many, many kids, young adults, many people dying that could have been, may not have died had their insurance companies approved an inpatient rehab stay.
Right. Right. They died.
Yep. So it was, the work
Drug
of the,
overdose.
yep,
Yep.
it was the work of the families really kind of advocating for that change to happen.
And it happened.
It did.
Okay.
It took 15 years, but it did.
Here's what I see on my end. I'm not in drug rehab. I'm more in the outpatient mental health, people coming for therapy for everyday stuff, anxiety, depression, OCD, all that kind of stuff, ADHD, all sorts of things. And I just went through an audit. And when the insurance company comes into audit, what they're looking for is proof and evidence of medical necessity. So as therapists, it's not enough that the patient is coming, they're saying, I'm having really bad anxiety, I'm having panic attacks, I need to come to therapy. It's a hard enough step to take as it is, right? And now we're billing their insurance. The insurance company is paying something towards their, their treatment. And now we have to make sure as therapists that we're documenting it correctly, because God forbid we're not documenting it correctly, the insurance company can and has the right to, and has
Deny payment.
turned around and said, we're going to claw you back. You have to pay us back all the money we paid you because we don't believe that Joe Schmo needs therapy. You haven't proven in your documentation. So now poor Joe Schmo is coming for therapy, but because his therapist isn't great at documenting his symptoms and what kind of therapy they're doing and how they're doing it, now all of a sudden the therapist has to pay back the insurance company X amount of dollars. And now we're going to turn around and we're going to give a bill to Joe Schmo and say, hey, Joe Schmo, you now owe us all this money because your insurance company decided they don't think you really need therapy. Who are they to decide whether or not Joe Schmo needs therapy? Why would he be coming? People don't come to therapy.
Or rehab.
Or rehab.
If they don't need it.
If they don't need it. So why do we have to bend over backwards to prove it and get denied and get clawed back? We get stupid clawbacks all the time because we're not meeting medical necessity. Because they get to decide, even though they don't know the person, that they don't. So I know that I don't need to go out and shoot somebody to prove a point. But what can I do, right? Like people in my field alone, we sit and we bitch and moan and complain about it, but we're not doing anything about it, right? We need to organize. We don't need to assassinate someone. I don't need to assassinate the CEO of GHI. What I need to do is I need to go out and say, hey, GHI, you're only paying this much money to reimburse therapists for therapy. A person has, anxiety or PTSD or whatever. They need to come to therapy, but you haven't raised your reimbursement rate for what you're paying me as a therapist since 1983. Literally, since 1983, they have not raised the reimbursement rate.
That's insane.
So nobody takes this insurance for mental health. No one. No. You have to pay out of pocket if you have that insurance company to go to therapy. No one's organizing. No one's going to them and saying, you have to do better.
I think people feel powerless.
Why do people feel powerless? What's happening?
Because people think that their voice individually is not going to be heard. And nobody cares, or, it's a big system. People get frustrated.
Right. So it's about somebody being willing to organize. Right. And I think that everyone kind of just sits on the sideline, like, to your point, and says, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I even feel that way. Right. I'm frustrated with insurance companies in my field. You are seeing it in yours. And yet it's like, well, where do I start? I don't know. Daunting.
Yeah.
It's daunting. So that's why when somebody like Luigi
comes in and kills someone, it's a very quick.
Within seconds, we all realize, hey, we're all living this frustration. We're all in this experience. We're all frustrated with the healthcare system in this country. We're all frustrated with, the United Healthcares and the Blue Cross Blue Shields and all of these healthcare systems and what's going on. We're all frustrated about it, but we all don't know what to do. But maybe now, because within a split second, we're all talking about it together at the same time, that's going to bring about change. So here's the catalyst. So the question becomes, how can we have a catalyst without somebody having to die? What can the catalyst be? What needs to happen? What needs to change? What do we need to do? I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think it's big things like that that get people talking.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been frustrated with insurance companies and, weren't publicly having the conversation until now.
Right.
It takes the hot guy killing the CEO to get us talking about
Poor
it.
Luigi. Yeah. And,
Poor
and
Luigi. Everyone's calling him the hot guy.
I feel bad for Luigi. I do, because I believe that for him to have done what he did, he was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably suffering physically and mentally, because somebody who's not suffering mentally doesn't do that.
I don't disagree.
Right? Somebody who takes it upon themselves to murder another human being and, you know, hold on to the murder weapon, is clearly planning on doing something else. Like, he wasn't done. And his life is over now, because he's going to go to jail for life.
Mm-hmm. As he should. He killed someone.
Yeah. So his life is over, because we have to keep society safe, right? We don't know what his next move would have been. I know that in his little notebook, he wrote that he could not bomb like the Unabomber because it could kill innocents. And that's nice. That's lovely.
It is kind.
However, we don't know that at some point he wouldn't have used the bomb.
Because wasn't there talk of he had been considering bomb?
He had been considering a bomb, and he didn't do the bomb because he didn't want to kill innocent people. But we don't
Respect,
know.
Luigi.
That's lovely, Luigi. However, we don't know that he wouldn't at some point have said,
Escalated and, yep,
I'm going to need to do this. There's no other way.
yep, this wasn't big enough. This didn't make, have the impact I wanted.
Yeah, so innocents,
Could
as he
have been
called
hurt.
them, 100% could have been hurt at some point. So unfortunately, Luigi, we have to keep society safe from you. And it's just sad, because I think he was disturbed. I think that he had good intentions, not towards Brian Thompson, apparently, but he wanted
For the system and for the little people.
He wanted to make a positive change in the system. But this isn't the way to make a positive change in the system.
No, it's a shame.
It is a shame. So let's come full circle back to what we started to talk about before, that I said I wanted to come back to. This polarization and this mass response and this jumping on the bandwagon of wanting to be a part of the Free Luigi movement. Is the Free Luigi movement sort of like that need to post the picture of the turkey on Thanksgiving on social media, and the need to post the picture of the tree? Is it a wanting to be a part of something that people are jumping into as well?
I think so. I think people are just, people are talking about him. So people are kind of, joining one camp or the other and sharing the memes and like the funny songs. And
Is there a funny song?
yeah, someone at work actually sent me a funny Luigi song.
What's the song?
I'll show you later.
You don't want to sing it right now for our pod people?
No.
Oh, come on.
We can post the link.
Okay. Oh, okay. We could do that.
We're so tech savvy.
Right, but like the Burger King thing that you brought up before, right?
We wouldn't have snitched. It's brilliant.
We wouldn't have snitched.
It was a perfect marketing moment for Burger King. It really was genius.
Except for the fact that it might turn off all the people that are horrified that there was an assassination that people are supporting. There's definitely those people.
But I think, again, there's enough people in the camp of Free Luigi. And, whether you agree with it or not, it's still funny. It's still, people are talking about it.
It is funny. I think it's horrible that somebody was assassinated. I do feel for this guy's family.
And I don't know that most people don't, disagree with the idea that murder is wrong and you can't do this. But
have we become so desensitized by social media and the movements that we become a part of so that we can be a part of something, that the hashtag Free Luigi has become so trendy that people that don't even understand the whole concept
all the nuances, yep.
and all the nuances of it are jumping on board just to be a part of something that they don't even understand what it's about.
Well, isn't that society in general? People form opinions all the time without really kind of understanding all of it and just kind of pick a side.
Do you think it's possible that that was part of Luigi's plan? Like, if we think about how he looked at technology and how technology is destroying society because it's creating this herd of sheep sort of mentality. I wonder if he knew, right, that he's going to go ahead and do this. It's going to become something that's trending on social media, and then technology itself would become the catalyst for change because it becomes something that goes viral,
Mm.
that brainwashes the people to kind of say, hey, I need to jump on board the Free Luigi movement because I want to fit into that. Which side am I on? Am I on the side of the bad guys, the pro-capitalist billionaire guys who don't are totally out of touch with society? Or am I on the side of just the regular guy who wants a free Luigi? Which side am I on? I need to pick a side, right? That polarization,
Hmm.
that wanting to be a part of something, that, it's this side or that side, that kind of thing, right? Which is, which brings us full circle back to the question, of, Luigi's mental illness, where it came from, society's response to it, the right or wrong to it. And again, I think what I really want to leave our pod people with, to ask yourself where this is showing up in your life every day, is it this or this? Can you find the middle ground to things? And can two things be right at the same time, even if they feel like they conflict? Can the healthcare system in our country be wrong? And can it also be wrong
To kill
to
someone.
take it upon yourself to assassinate a potentially innocent person? Right? So,
And I think that's where most people kind of struggle. I mean, people are either one camp or the other and have a hard time with the duality of two things being right at the same time.
this is what we're seeing in society, and this is what we're seeing in politics. And, that's a whole other
I see it at
conversation.
work all the time too with patients.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can want to get sober, but I could also still want to drink or to get high, or I can want my kid back, but I could still also want to act out. Like, because the whole topic for a whole other podcast.
Yeah. I could be sad that my child has ADHD, but I could also want to help him and do things to make it better, right? There's two different things that can exist at the same time. And I think that's where society is struggling, and that's where we need to come together and
Find
figure
a middle
out,
ground.
find a middle ground, right? Like, it's the healthcare system is wrong, but assassination is also wrong. We could feel bad for Luigi and say, that's really sad that he's brought to this place in his life, this dark, dark place, to ruin his life and someone else's. But what he did was wrong.
I can also feel bad for Brian Thompson
Yeah.
and his family.
I don't know if he was a good or bad guy. Maybe he was a bad guy. I don't know. But that doesn't mean that he deserved to die and that his children deserve to lose their father, right? More things can exist, even if they feel conflicting, together than we realize. So that's our episode. We appreciate you joining us in this hard conversation that's sort of trending in our world today. If you find our podcast helpful, remember to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening so that you can be informed when new episodes come around. I'm Stacy.
And I'm Heather.
And we are Why Do People Do That? Unraveling the mystery
Of why people do that.
why people do that. See you next time.
Thanks.